The first diver broke the surface, gasping in the humid Florida air. But his partner, 23-year-old Lance Crawford, never followed. Somewhere below, in the black water of Elatchua Sink, he had vanished. What began as a casual dive into a summer sinkhole had turned into a nightmare. For 3 days, rescuers searched the submerged caverns, battling darkness and silt so thick it erased every light. When they finally found him, Lance lay deep inside the cave, silent, unreachable. Why had one man escaped while the other was swallowed whole? This is the chilling mystery of the Elatchua Sink tragedy. In the heart of Elatchua County, Florida, lies a quiet pond that hides a dangerous secret. Known locally as Elatchua Sink, it looks like an ordinary stretch of still water surrounded by brush and farmland. But beneath the surface is a limestone cavern, a flooded passageway carved over thousands of years, twisting downward into chambers where daylight cannot reach. The water is deceptively inviting, clear on the surface, but quickly turning into a silt-filled maze where a single misplaced kick can erase all visibility. In July of 1992, 2 young men decided to test its depths. Among them was Lance Crawford, a 23-year-old University of Florida agriculture student. He was adventurous, comfortable in the water, and eager to explore. To him, Elatchua Sink was not a threat, but an opportunity, a chance to push boundaries in a place that few dared to enter. The dive began like many others, 2 friends slipping below the surface on a summer afternoon. At first, the water was calm, the descent steady, the passage open. But Elatchua Sink had a reputation. It was unpredictable, dangerous, and unforgiving to those who underestimated it. For Crawford, that reputation would soon become reality. The 2 men slipped deeper into Elatchua Sink, flashlights cutting through the dark water. The limestone walls closed in, their beams reflecting off silt that stirred with every movement. At first, the dive felt manageable, the guideline marking their path, and the silence broken only by the hiss of regulators. But somewhere in the narrow passages, something changed. Lance Crawford began to fall behind. His partner pressed forward, then turned, expecting to see his light close behind. Instead, there was only blackness. He doubled back, searching the clouded water, but Crawford was gone. On the surface, the survivor emerged shaken, gasping for air, and gave the first chilling report. Lance had vanished below. Divers rushed in to search, following the same routes, but conditions deteriorated rapidly. Every fin stroke filled the tunnels with swirling mud, wiping out visibility to nothing. Hours stretched into days. Divers scoured the sinkhole, retracing every passage, but there was no sign of him. Only on the 3rd day did their lights finally reveal the grim truth. Lance Crawford was still deep inside Elatchua Sink, far from the surface, suspended in the silent cavern that had become his grave. What happened to Lance Crawford in those final minutes remains uncertain, but divers and investigators pieced together a chilling picture. Somewhere in the silted tunnels, disorientation struck. With the guideline hidden in the murk and the walls pressing close, he may have turned into a false passage, searching desperately for light that was no longer there. As the blackness thickened, panic would have followed. His breathing, once controlled, became faster, draining precious air. The hiss of his regulator echoed against the limestone as his tank slipped toward empty. Without a clear exit, every choice became guesswork. Some believe he may have pushed deeper into the wrong tunnel, convinced it led out. Others suggest exhaustion overtook him, his body slowing as the carbon dioxide built up. What is certain is that he never found his way back to his partner. In those last moments, surrounded by total darkness, Lance likely realized the truth. He was lost, alone, and out of time. His final breaths disappeared into the cave, leaving only silence behind. When searchers later found him, his equipment was intact, but his air was gone. Elatchua Sink had claimed him in its depths, without mercy. When Lance Crawford's partner surfaced alone on July 25, 1992, the call for help was immediate. Local law enforcement and specialized recovery divers converged on Elatchua Sink, bracing for the worst. Few believed that anyone lost inside the cave could survive more than a few hours, but families and rescuers held onto hope. The search proved grueling. Each descent into the sink stirred up thick clouds of silt that erased visibility in seconds. Divers followed lines slowly, often working by touch alone. The passages twisted unpredictably, narrowing without warning, each turn threatening to trap those who searched for him. Day 1 ended with nothing. Day 2 stretched on with the same results, divers surfacing exhausted, eyes burning from hours in black water. It wasn't until the third day that progress came. Pushing deeper into the cave, a recovery team finally found him. Crawford's body rested motionless, wedged in a silent chamber far from the entrance. His gear was intact, but his tank was empty. With care and precision, the team brought him back through the winding passages. When they surfaced at last, the waiting crowd received the confirmation they had feared. Lance Crawford would not be coming home. The death of Lance Crawford sent shockwaves through Alachua County and the University of Florida community. At just 23 years old, his life had been cut short in a sinkhole that looked harmless from the surface, yet concealed deadly risks below. Friends described him as adventurous and full of energy, a student with his future ahead of him. To many, it was unthinkable that a summer dive could end in such tragedy. For the diving community, Crawford's loss reinforced a painful truth. Florida's caves and sinkholes lure countless explorers each year, but they are unforgiving to those unprepared for their hazards. Silt-outs, disorientation, and the relentless overhead environment leave no room for mistakes. Even with a buddy close by, one wrong turn can separate partners forever. Authorities once again urge divers to respect cave systems, stressing that specialized training and equipment are essential for survival. But Elatchua Sink's deceptive calm continues to tempt risk-takers, its waters hiding the memory of those who never came back. For those who knew him, Lance is remembered not for how he died, but for the life he lived, a reminder that even the strongest among us can be claimed in an instant by the silence of the deep. In February 1971, a young German medical student entered the flooded passages of a Welsh cave, expecting an afternoon of exploration. He never returned. His name was Paul Heinz Esser, and his disappearance would become one of the longest unresolved tragedies in British caving history. Porth Ogof, located in the Brecon Beacons National Park of South Wales, is one of the largest cave entrances in the United Kingdom. It has more than 15 entrances, with some passages stretching for over a mile. Among cavers, it is both a popular site and a notorious one. Cold underground streams cut through its chambers, and several sections are submerged sumps where air pockets vanish into complete darkness. Over the years, the cave has earned a grim reputation. Dozens of people have lost their lives in its waters, making it one of the deadliest caves in the UK. On 13th February 1971, Paul Heinz Esser, then 24 years old, decided to explore Porth near Ogof with diving gear. He was a skilled swimmer, but relatively new to cave diving. That afternoon, he descended into the cave's submerged passages. Inside the sump, visibility was close to zero, and the tunnel narrowed into twisting limestone corridors. Essa attempted to follow a guideline laid down by earlier divers, but at some point, he lost contact with it. In the disorienting blackness, he became trapped. Rescue divers later believed he panicked, ran out of air, and drowned deep within the passage. When Essa failed to surface, rescue teams were quickly called. Divers from the South and Mid-Wales Cave Rescue Team searched the sump repeatedly, but conditions made recovery impossible. The passages were too narrow, the water freezing cold, and the silt made visibility nearly non-existent. After days of searching, authorities had no choice but to suspend operations. For decades afterward, Essa's body remained somewhere in the flooded limestone tunnels. His story became a somber legend, a warning repeated to every new generation of cave divers. In 2010, nearly 4 decades after Essa's disappearance, divers attempted a new search. Advances in diving technology and a carefully planned recovery operation finally allowed them to navigate the dangerous sump. In April of that year, Essa's remains were discovered deep inside the cave and carefully brought to the surface. The recovery was attended by local officials and members of his family. A coroner later confirmed his death as accidental drowning. After 39 years, the mystery of Paul Heinz Esser's fate was finally resolved. The dive of Paul Heinz Esser at Porth near Ogof remains a chilling reminder of the risks of cave diving. Even a seemingly well-prepared diver can succumb to the dangers of darkness, disorientation, and cold water. Today, Porth near Ogof still attracts visitors, but its history carries a cautionary weight. The story of Esser's final dive endures not just as a tragedy, but as a lesson about respecting the unseen dangers that lie beneath the earth. South Australia's Kilsby Sinkhole looks like nothing more than a quiet pond in the middle of farmland, but beneath its calm surface lies one of the most treacherous underwater caverns in the country. In 1969, 2 young divers, Brett and Patrick, descended into its depths, unaware of how quickly the sinkhole could turn from wonder to nightmare. What started as an afternoon dive soon unraveled into confusion, panic, and tragedy. The Kilsby Sinkhole had claimed its first victims and left a warning etched in its dark waters that echoes to this day. The Kilsby Sinkhole lies just outside Mount Gambier in South Australia, a region carved by limestone and riddled with caves, ponds, and subterranean rivers. To a passerby, it looks unremarkable. An oval pool of water surrounded by farmland, its edges marked by sheer limestone walls. But beneath that still surface stretches an immense cavern, plunging to depths of over 60 meters. The clarity of the water is breathtaking. Divers describe it as floating in air, where even the deepest shadows are visible in astonishing detail. Yet beauty has always masked danger here. With no natural light reaching the lowest chambers, divers are entirely dependent on artificial illumination. The walls are jagged, the passages narrow, and the descent is deceptively fast. In the 1960s, cave diving was still in its infancy in Australia. Safety training was minimal, guidelines were rare, and many divers entered with little more than enthusiasm and hope. In March 1969, Brett and Patrick, 2 young recreational divers, arrived at the Kilsby Sinkhole with the excitement of explorers about to step into an unknown world. Neither were highly trained in cave diving. At the time, very few in Australia were, but they had heard stories of the sinkhole's crystal clear waters and vast chambers. What they saw from the surface was enough to draw them in. A mirror-like pond that seemed calm, inviting and harmless. With their gear strapped on, they slipped beneath the surface. At once, the clarity of the water unfolded before them. Sunlight penetrated deep into the first chamber, revealing limestone walls that dropped away in sheer cliffs. It felt as though they were suspended in mid-air, floating in a cathedral of stone and water. The awe of the moment carried them deeper. Descending past 20 meters, the light began to fade. The shadows of the cavern pressed closer, and the walls opened into darker passages. There were no guidelines to mark a safe route, no permanent reels strung through the sinkhole as there would be in later years. Each kick of their fins carried them farther into the unknown. As they explored, the silence was absolute, broken only by the hiss of their regulators. Brett and Patrick were pushing deeper, farther from the safety of the surface, relying only on instinct and their basic scuba skills. But in places like the Kilsby Sinkhole, beauty can turn against you in an instant. A wrong turn, a misplaced fin stroke, or a moment of hesitation can transform wonder into disaster. Unseen above, the still surface betrayed nothing, but below, in the growing darkness, the dive was already shifting toward catastrophe. As Brett and Patrick ventured deeper, the glow of the entrance faded until it was just a faint shimmer far above. Their torch beams cut narrow tunnels of light through the dark water, but the vastness of the sinkhole quickly overwhelmed their sense of direction. With no guideline to follow, orientation slipped away. At some point, they realized they had gone too far. Their air gauges were dropping, the exit was no longer visible, and the sheer walls around them offered no clear path upward. Panic set in. Brett's breathing quickened, each inhale draining his tank faster. Patrick tried to steady his friend, but in the silence of the depths, fear grew louder than reason. Silt stirred from the floor, clouding their visibility. The water that had once seemed like glass now closed in around them, murky and suffocating. Disoriented, they swam in circles, searching desperately for the way out. Every second, the weight of their predicament pressed harder. When rescuers later pieced together the scene, it was clear the young divers had lost control in those final minutes. One of them likely ran out of air first, regulator slipping from his mouth as unconsciousness set in. The other, alone and terrified, followed soon after. In the dark silence of the sinkhole, both lives ended before they could find the surface. The deaths of Brett and Patrick in 1969 marked the first widely reported fatalities at the Kilsby Sinkhole, and their loss sent shockwaves through Australia's diving community. The sinkhole, once spoken of as a hidden marvel, now carried a darker reputation, one of beauty intertwined with lethal risk. For the families, grief was immediate and devastating. 2 young lives, full of promise, had been silenced in a place that seemed so serene from the surface. Locals began to question whether the sinkhole should remain open at all, while authorities and divers debated the dangers of exploring such sites without proper training or safety measures. In the aftermath, cave diving organizations began pushing harder for standardized practices, guidelines, redundant equipment, and formal training. The tragedy became one of the cautionary tales repeated in dive briefings across South Australia. Today, the Kilsby Sinkhole remains both a premier dive site and a memorial to those who entered before safety protocols existed. The story of Brett and Patrick endures as a reminder that beneath the calmest waters, risk waits silently, and that every descent into the depths must be made with respect for what lies below.